It is remarkably hard for someone to change the Missouri Constitution. You have to propose a petition, vet ballot language, then go around the state and collect well more than 170,000 signatures. Those signatures have to be verified. And after all of that, a majority of voters across the state have to approve it at the polls. In recent years, that's how Missouri voters approved medical and recreational marijuana, Medicaid expansion, and yes, even abortion rights. Conservatives haven't been too keen with that last one, or many of the other issues, so they devised a way to make it nearly impossible for you to amend anything without their help in the General Assembly. Packed into the special session is an effort to slow the initiative petition process Republicans have tried to scuttle for years. They now want proposed amendments to be approved by a majority of voters in each of the state's 8 congressional districts. Voter advocates point out this essentially silences the initiative petition process because of how easy it would be to defeat any of these measures at the polls.
This really is not political. This is not about Democrats versus Republicans. In fact, what it is about people versus politicians. You can just put your money in one district and kill the whole thing. And so this is a really anti-democratic process right now.
In fact, our friends at the Missouri Independent crunched the numbers using last year's elections and found as few as 5% of voters could derail initiative petition measures with these rules in place. So they would be much easier to kill than keep alive. This change does have to be approved by voters, and oddly enough, a simple majority is all it would take to pass. Let's dive in with our roundtable of journalists. Please welcome KMBC9 political reporter Michael Mahoney and Jason Hancock, editor-in-chief of the Missouri Independent. Thank you both for being here. Jason, again, this is something Republicans have wanted to do away with for years.
Yeah, Republican lawmakers have been smarting for as long as I've been in Missouri about these so-called liberal and progressive constitutional amendments that are being funded by national groups, out-of-state groups. They say that the system is broken and that the Constitution shouldn't be so easy to amend. The problem is that in this particular instance, it's not a matter of making it harder to amend the Constitution, which a lot of previous proposals would do. This does make it virtually impossible for an initiative petition to pass. As few as 5% of voters in the state could derail the entire process and kill a ballot measure.
In Mahoney, it's important to note here, the bill sponsor, we talked to him, said that this only affects constitutional amendments because, remember, there are regular ballot measures brought by petitions as well. He told us that he didn't think the bill would get through the Senate if they had tacked that on. But, you know, we've seen them change approved laws before in the legislature. That could be that avenue.
Yeah, that is a big change here, or in another way to put it, the legislators have a home field advantage on this in the fact that if they do something in order to put it on a ballot as constitutional amendment, they don't have to meet the same thresholds. And that is among the one of the many things that Democrats say makes this unfair. And as Jason said, this would pretty much kill any shot of a initiative petition from the citizens coming up, and at least in my opinion and some others.
Yeah, so this again would have to go on a ballot. And Jason, we know that there are other initiative petition drives now to try and at least combat this in some way.
Yeah, you have a group called Respect Missouri Voters that's been circulating petitions to put another constitutional amendment on the ballot that would raise the threshold for the legislature to overturn a citizen-led initiative petition. So in one of the versions, it's 80% of legislators would have to agree in order to overturn something that was approved by the citizens. Obviously, that would really tilt the balance in favor of the citizen-led petitions. It would take the legislature out of the process almost entirely. There's no way you're going to find 80% of lawmakers agreeing on virtually anything. So yeah, there was a massive rally at the Capitol this week protesting this and a plan to gerrymander the congressional map, where they were circulating petitions, getting signatures in the hopes of putting that on the 2026 ballot. So you could have these dueling proposals before voters next year, one that would limit the citizens' participation and the other that would limit the legislatures.
Really trying to fight fire with fire.
Yeah, that and plus the fact that it's almost a certainty that whatever has come out of the legislature here is going to court, and the question is how quickly does it go to court, and how does that affect the timeline further down. So there are lots of moving parts on this beyond just what took place this past week in Jefferson City.
If voters do approve this, I mean, these changes really would turn campaigning on its head, right? Because you just have to go into the smallest district and try to overturn that and try to win the vote there.
It's really interesting. There is a whole cottage industry. It's not even really a cottage industry around initiative petitions that work through the states, the 34 states that allow this. And there are paid petition gathering companies that do this for a living, and it's a big industry in politics. It's as big as, almost as big, I think, as campaign consulting.
Jason, 30 seconds left. What do you expect? Mahoney, of course, mentioned legal battles, and those have to be forthcoming. What else can we expect?
I think you're going to see groups. Missouri Realtors is one, for example, that said flatly they're going to spend big money to try to defeat this if it ends up on the ballot. They have very deep pockets, and so I think you're going to see a very well-funded no campaign if this does make it on the ballot and survives all the legal threats that also seem pretty inevitable.
All right, we'll see what happens. Jason Hancock, Michael Mahoney, thank you so much.